Pure class healing in ESO is back, and it's not just in PvE, but in PvP too. Fans of the channel are probably already familiar with my PvP build, but just in case you're not, I'll be going over everything you need to know about pure class PvP healing. So my name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and let's start by giving you a quick overview of the build. So, one thing I want to mention right off the bat is that I will be demonstrating this build on my Templar, but I'll go over how this build will look on each class. My PvP healer build acts as sort of a healer and tank in one. You won't have quite the same healing output as like a burst healer setup, but you'll do much more for your team than one of those troll tank builds. It focuses on balancing our own survivability to put pressure on objectives, while also providing enough healing and defensive buffs to keep our team alive. Fans of the channel may notice a couple small differences from my subclass PvP build, the biggest being that I'm now running Transmutation on my front bar and Pariah on my back bar rather than the other way around. It's mostly just a personal preference, there's pros and cons to both, so if you're still running Pariah on front bar and Transmutation on back bar, it's totally fine. There's not a huge difference, honestly. Anyway, since we're back to pure class builds, I don't need to tell you what skill lines we're going to be using, so instead, I'll be going over the race and class mastery passives we'll be using. So, when it comes to your race, I always like to mention that pretty much any race is valid when it comes to PvP. Most races in the game will bring something that will be useful to us in a PvP setting. I think Nord might be the best option, I'm not 100% sure, but you guys know I typically run Breton pretty much all the time. For our class masteries, let's start with a Templar. The first is Devout Guardian. While Sacred Ground is active, we gain a decent damage shield along with some solid resource recovery once every 6 seconds. If that shield breaks, and it'll break in PvP, we gain 10 ultimate. Then we have Bastion of Light. This gives you extra sources of Sacred Ground, and while any source of Sacred Ground is active, you gain a pretty substantial self-heal that ticks every second. If you are at full health when this self-heal ticks, you instead gain 2 ultimate. Next on the class masteries is the Arcanist, and it actually didn't change from PvE. The first is Inkscribe's Verve, which upon healing or overhealing for a total of 100k health, will generate a Crux as well as grant us and our group members major force for 10 seconds, increasing critical damage by 20%. Then, we also have Erudite's Rigor, which upgrades Fate-Woven Armor to inflict minor cowardice on our attacker, while also granting us and our group major vitality. Then we are also granted 1 ult per Crux we have. Up next, the Nightblade, and even though you've actually got a lot of really good options here, I also didn't change this from PvE. First, we have Nocturnal Inspiration, which grants us a chance to receive 2 ultimate whenever we proc the Hemorrhage passive. The Hemorrhage passive, by the way, just requires either our damage or healing to critically strike while we have an assassination ability slotted. Then, we have Share the Spoils, which upgrades the transfer passive to grant group members 250 magicka and stamina, as well as 2 ultimate, while also doubling the ultimate you gain when it activates. The transfer passive procs whenever we activate a siphoning ability. Next, we have the Warden. First is Bountiful Harvest, which upgrades the Nature's Gift passive to grant us and our group members extra resources, as well as major heroism. Bountiful Harvest can be activated by simply healing or overhealing an ally with a green balance ability. Then, we also have Glacial Obstinance, which upgrades the Bond with Nature passive to also activate from Winter's Embrace abilities and grants us additional weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds if we are at full health. So, with this passive, Bond with Nature will activate when either an Animal Companion or Winter's Embrace skill ends. Next on the list is Necromancer. Our first mastery is Nothing Wasted, which upgrades the Corpse Consumption passive to grant us additional max health and weapon and spell damage when we consume a corpse. Then, we also have Pound of Flesh, which has a chance to heal us and restore stamina anytime we take damage. Up next is the Sorcerer. First is Sphere of Influence. When casting a damage shield on ourselves or an ally, it grants the affected person an additional damage shield as well as extra resource recovery. Then, we have Conservation of Energy, which upgrades the Blood Magic passive, which heals us when we cast a Dark Magic ability, to now work with all abilities with a cost and restore magicka and stamina too. Finally, we have the Dragonknight. First up is Lead from the Front. When activating the Storm Voice passive, which is activated by casting an ultimate ability, you'll grant us and group members Major Berserk and Major Protection for 1 second per 15 ultimate spent, increasing our damage done and reducing our damage taken by 10%. Then we have Resolute Defense, which increases the amount of damage we can block the longer we hold our block, and it also has a chance to restore stamina to us. If you have any questions about any of my choices, please feel free to ask away, but otherwise, let's go ahead and move on to our attributes and Mundus. For our attributes, I put all 64 into health to give us a boost to our survivability. For a Mundus, you can go with either the Ritual or the Atronach. Personally, I think the Atronach works best with this build in general, but some classes may benefit more from the Ritual, so you may just need to do a little bit of testing and decide for yourself. When it comes to food, Orzorga's smoked bear haunch will be our best in slot food option, though it can be expensive, so for a cheaper alternative, feel free to use the Jewels of Misrule. For our potions, I personally recommend using Tri-Restoration potions, but you could use Spell Power, Heroism, or even just some simple Magicka Restore potions as well, whatever works best for you. Next, let's talk about champion points. So, you can see on screen right now what I like to use. As I usually mention with PvP builds, champion points are often disabled in a lot of PvP content, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. These may not be the most perfectly optimized champion points, though most of my PvP experience is in Battlegrounds where champion points are disabled. So, I'll let you make the decision if you want to bring this into Cyrodiil, if you want to change some things. But next, let's talk about what skills we're bringing for each build. With PvP, there aren't as many core skills or skills that we'll always bring regardless of class as there are in my PvE builds. Still though, there are a couple, and then I'll tell you what my sort of general skill bar logic is so you understand my choice in my class skills. So for the core skills, first we have Healing Burst. This is the Soul Burst Scribe skill from the Soul Magic skill line. Try saying that 5 times fast. I scribed it with the heal, Sage's Remedy for a heal over time, and Minor Resolve. This is basically our PvP replacement for Combat Prayer. It acts as our main group burst heal that heals in a radius around us and provides us with a long uptime on Minor Resolve. Then we have Healing Soul. This is the Wield Soul Scribe skill, also from the Soul Magic skill line. I scribed it with a heal, heal over time, and Major Vitality. It's our single target heal that acts as our uh-oh button for ourselves or an ally when there's a lot of pressure being put on a single person. Then we have Radiating Regeneration. This is a sticky heal over time that offers us strong passive healing and is needed for one of our set items. And then we have Reviving Barrier. Ideally, this is the main defensive ultimate that we'll be casting when things get hairy, though even when we don't have enough ult charge to cast it, we can still benefit from the passive extra Magicka recovery we get from having this slotted with the support passives. From there, I've got some things I like to prioritize for each class. Firstly, a source of minor intellect and endurance for the team if it's feasible, minor protection for the team, major resolve, ideally for everyone, but more than likely we're only going to be able to apply it to ourselves, minor lifesteal to give some decent healing over time to even our Ring of Pale Order and Vampire friends, a strong dedicated self-heal or shield that can help take some of the heat off of us so we can focus on our friends, and an escape tool that gives us expedition or a cleanse or ideally both. We won't always have every single one of these for every single class, but I think I was able to tick just about every box on every class. So now let me just give you a brief overview of what a full skill setup would look like on each class. Starting with the Templar, on the front bar we have Radiant Aura, Healing Burst, Overflowing Altar, Warding Contingency, Radiating Regeneration, and Practiced Incantation. Then, on our back bar, we have Healing Soul, Living Dark, Extended Ritual, Channeled Focus, Race Against Time, and Reviving Barrier. For the Arcanist, on the front bar, we've got Zena's Empowering Disc, Healing Burst, Healing Springs, Warding Contingency, Radiating Regeneration, and Gibbering Shelter. On our back bar, we've got Healing Soul, Spite Ward of the Lucid Mind, Overflowing Altar, Crux Weaver Armor, Race Against Time, and Reviving Barrier. For the Nightblade, on the front bar, we have Refreshing Path, Healing Burst, Funnel Health, Warden Contingency, Radiating Regeneration, and Soul Harvest. On the back bar, we have Healing Soul, Sap Essence, Overflowing Altar, Merciless Resolve, Phantasmal Escape, and Reviving Barrier. For the Warden, on the front bar, we've got Blue Betty, Healing Burst, Budding Seeds, Warden Contingency, Radiating Regeneration, and Healing Thicket. Then, on the back bar, we have Healing Soul, Leeching Vines, Polar Wind, Expansive Frostcloak, Deceptive Predator, and Reviving Barrier. For the Necromancer, on the front bar, we have Spirit Guardian, Healing Burst, Healing Springs, Agony Totem, Radiating Regeneration, and Renewing Animation. Then, on the back bar, we have Healing Soul, Deaden Pain, Overflowing Altar, Summoner's Armor, Race Against Time, and Reviving Barrier. For the Sorcerer, on the front bar, we have Regenerative Ward, Healing Burst, Power Surge, Warding Contingency, Radiating Regeneration, and Absorption Field. Then, on the back bar, we have Healing Soul, Daedric Refuge, Overflowing Altar, Boundless Storm, Ball of Lightning, and Reviving Barrier. Finally, for the Dragonknight, on the front bar we have Fragmented Shield, Healing Burst, Hearth and Home, Blood of the Elder Dragon, Radiating Regeneration, and Magma Shell. On the back bar, we have Healing Soul, Cauterize, Overflowing Altar, Earth Shield Mantle, Protect the Brood, and Reviving Barrier. Whew, okay. If you have any questions about any of that, please don't hesitate to ask, but I think it's finally time to move on to sets, traits, and enchantments. So here are the sets that we will be using for this build, as well as how I'm wearing them. Starting with our 2-piece monster set, I'm using Ozazen the Inferno. It provides armor to our team when overhealing, and it provides minor vitality when healing. For our first 5-piece set, I'm using the Robes of Transmutation, as it provides a hefty amount of crit resistance to anyone we heal. Then, for our other 5-piece set, I'm using Mark of the Pariah as our self-sustain set, which grants us increased armor as our health gets lower. Finally, I'm using an arena weapon, which is the Maelstrom's Restoration Staff. This will grant us magicka anytime Radiating Regeneration critically strikes us or an ally. And here's where you can acquire every single one of those sets. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. I know the placements you just saw of those sets were probably a little wonky, but it's mainly to make sure we're wearing enough heavy armor to stay alive. And speaking of heavy armor, let's talk about armor weights. For PvP healing builds, you'll generally want 3 to 4 heavy pieces, 1 to 2 medium pieces, and then 1 to 2 light pieces. Your exact weight distribution may depend on what class you're using, or what sort of content you're running, or stuff like that. I'm using 4 heavy, 1 medium, 2 light, and that's been working very well for me. Feel free to copy that exactly, or do a little of your own testing to see what works for you. Then, for our traits and enchantments, starting with our armor, I like to use Reinforced on heavy armor pieces and Impenetrable on light and medium pieces, with the Prismatic Defense enchantment. You may have noticed earlier that my monster set was not using these. That's just simply because I also use it for PvE content, so I just left the PvE traits and enchantments on there, just in case you were wondering. For our jewelry, I like to use the Triune trait with the Prismatic Recovery enchantment. For our weapons, so a Restoration Staff on our front bar and a one-handed weapon on our back bar, I use the Powered trait with the Absorb Magicka enchantment. Then, for our shield, which is paired with our one-handed weapon on the back bar, I use the Sturdy trait and Max Magicka enchantment. And that was my Update 50 PvP healer build for all classes. Sorry it took me so long to get this out. ESO has had a busy week, and I wanted to stay on top of current events. I appreciate your patience, and as always, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Don't forget to check out the link in the description to follow me on stuff and join my Discord server. Before I head out, I also want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters as well as my YouTube members. Thank you guys for all that you do, and it means a lot. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others. I hope to see you guys on the battlegrounds, and I will catch y'all in the next one.